are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
All right, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. It is Toward Anarchy. I'm your host, Michael Storm, and it is a beautiful Easter Sunday in the middle of America here in Topeka, Kansas. That's where I'm at, and I am live on the Republic Broadcasting Network, as I am every Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. at this time, Central Standard Time. If you're live with me now, that's awesome. That's great. I appreciate you taking the time to join in and just hang out and listen and see what I have to say and what interesting guests I'll bring you. I've had some fun here recently with just being here and talking about what's going on and not having a guest or anything like that where there's any sort of other interruption than my own track of thought. You know, the commercial breaks, of course, we have to deal with those, but hey, if they weren't there, if you guys weren't supporting the network, there'd be no way that we could do this at all. I wouldn't be able to come here and talk to you like I do and talk to you about the things that I find interesting in the world, because I think a lot of the times that they're leaving out half the story when they're talking about things. They're leaving out half the story, and everybody's making a judgment. And I know, I get that. I get these arguments about what was he on, and what had he been doing right before? What other crimes was he guilty of? Why were they there in the first place to do what they do and to exercise their authority? I mean, really, what is it that Jesus did to deserve being hung on the cross in the first place? You thought I was talking about Derek Chauvin and the Floyd trial, the Derek Chauvin trial and the Floyd murder and all that, didn't you? Now, it's an interesting, not dissimilar, but not entirely similar situation. It's the major problem with authority. Basically, on this day about 2,000 years ago, this is all approximate within days and times from the way this story goes, and depending on who's telling the story, the police acting on authority under the color of law, from bad information, from political views, from these things that we all still deal with today, the mislabeling and mischaracterization of people because of their stance against the abuses of those in power, the misuse of authority. If there's to be any valid authority at all, it has to be constrained, and there's some pretty simple understandings, and it's one of the reasons why I guess a lot of people will say that Jesus was an anarchist. There's a lot of anarchists and libertarian types will use that argument that Jesus was an anarchist, and they'll point to particular things, and it's as valid an argument as anything about a character from an amalgamation of different stories and ideas and theologies and things that existed before him to actually come out on the other side of it. But he holds the characteristics, the important characteristics of someone who believes in a live and let live and a nonviolent approach to things. So it's very certainly compatible. I've had the conversation here. We've had some people on to talk about it. Craig Hargis was on the show, and we, the Bad Roman Project, and we talked about that basic notion of that compatibility between the teachings of Christ, the Christ figure, and the anarchist notion. But who the hell am I to say anything? Because I'm a terrible Christian. I haven't been in the church in a long time. And I'm an even worse anarchist. I can't quote you Bible and verse of either one of those things. I saw something earlier this week that was this. It's silly to me. I won't harp on it, but it was just this meme about anarchy, particularly the imagery of anarchy, and it's the anarchist A's and the sort of the difference between the spray painted anarchy outside of the circles, outside of the circle. You know, I'm talking about the circle A anarchy thing, where the lines of the A break through the outside of the circle. I don't have a good example of it. If you go to towardanarchy.com, you look at my A, it's inside the circle because I thought it looked better inside the circle, not because I believe that there is some purpose, or that I am supposed to have understood that there was some purpose with the particulars about the A, and it's supposed to stay inside the circle because the circle is about something. It's not, this is just sloppy left-wing tagger stuff, this other A. That was the implication. That wasn't the implication, that was the statement made in this imagery that I saw, this meme that I saw, and whatever. I don't anarchy right. I just, that's the problem. I don't anarchy right. I'm not anarchying like everybody else. I'm definitely on the outside. I'm not on the mainstream. I'm not one of the flock. You know, I don't get recognized as one of the names of people when you talk about it, at least not in that celebritarian sense. You know, there's those handful of people, and they've been at it for a long time, and they put in a lot of work and a lot of effort to do and be who they are. I'm not decrying that at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just suggesting that I'm working this from the outside. For one thing, I find that a lot of these people that I'm talking about, now that they are where they are, they're talking to anarchists. They're talking to other people. They become it all these flashes through my mind, the way my mind works, all these cult leaders, priests, all these things, all these images pop through my mind right at the time that I'm saying this. But that's what I apologize because I don't mean that to anybody, but that's my mind working like that, and I've talked about the way it does. I just see them becoming more of a leader, more of a preaching to the choir sort of individual, instead of like myself. I see myself. I'm not talking to anarchists. I wouldn't be on RBN. I wouldn't be on Republic Broadcasting Network as my core. I think if I really wanted to talk to anarchists, because that's not the core audience of RBN. I think that there are plenty of people who are like they're there, they already are, or they're just teetering on the edge, and they just need that little bit of a push. So I'm definitely talking to a susceptible audience, but I see a different purpose in the work there, and it's interesting some of the games that they play. They try to trap you into this ideology. Well, if there was a switch and you could end authoritarianism today, would you do it? Come on, man. Do we really have to play in these hypothetical games like that? Do we have to create a scenario? It's already tougher. That's unrealistic, but it's tougher than what we're already dealing with. Are you kidding me? And isn't it just good enough that we're doing what we're doing now, right now, in the moment? And I've always thought that, I mean, any effort was pretty good effort if it's to be assumed that we're supposed to be living for other people, and I don't think we are. I think that you can. That's absolutely true. I think it's a wonderful thing when you do. I think everybody probably does it. Particularly family people, they're going to live for other people, oftentimes to their own detriment, which is there has to be some give and take, and I like being in the middle where I can come and go. I think it's a little bit. I even drive in the middle lane of the. It makes sense to me. You drive in the middle of the lane. That way you can go left or you go right. I don't know. It's always been my path is that path of least resistance. I have to take it because anytime. I mean, it's an interesting thing because we're at such a weird point in history. I think everything has changed. Everything has escalated so fast, has ratcheted up, particularly over the last few years. We have this technocratic medical dictatorship that has developed. I talked about it years ago. In fact, is it one of the ones that's up there? I recently went through. I don't have them all up there yet, and I bet it's probably not one of the ones that's there at all. In fact, it's not even the right link at the moment. It actually points at the archive. That's kind of funny. I'll have to fix that, and I'll have to post it up there. But there's an article I wrote in 2018, late 2018, early 19. I might be able to find the original date on it, but the original website it was posted to is gone, so I can't. I don't have that to go back and look at. But it was sometime around in the last few years where we're talking about the vaccinations with measles and some of the outbreaks and things that had happened over the last few years. There have been a couple of them, and there have been conversations about them. And I said very clearly that this was one of those points, one of those break points for a lot of people, this medical tyranny that we face. And right now, boy, the people you voted for, your leaders, are doing, well, I mean, they're doing what they always do. I guess that's what gets me, and that's why I get that we're in this weird, precarious place where the voices are extremely important. I have this conversation coming up today, and this is why this is all in the back of my head. It's not about other people and what they're saying, and while I'm using some of these things that I've run across over the past week, in reference to anarchy and sort of the idea that we should be doing things for other people instead of doing things for ourselves. I think that's a total notion of anarchy that exists, that I've been talking about to you this whole time, this idea that when our general understanding of what's best for everyone is probably what we generally find is best for ourselves. And that's why we get along so well. That's why we live in anarchy. That's why we don't have any consideration or thought for the need for opinion of the authority in all of these things that we do, with the myriad of actions and ideas and things that we put forward and out into the world every single day. This is what it is. And so I have this conversation in my head about where we're going and at this tipping point and this weird change, this quickening, whatever it is that we're going through. And so it was great to have these debates that I've had the last couple of months and to be invited to be a guest on Echo Chamber, because I've been asked to come and defend my ideals as opposed to just sit here and sort of chat about them. You know, I'm challenged. I don't accept much challenge here. It's not about that here. We learned that early on in the show, didn't we? We don't like to play that game. I'm just here to have my conversation, and you take it or leave it as it is. And I get these rare opportunities to get involved in something like that, where it's a little bit more directed, and in that debate format, I'm really, I guess I'm pretty good at it. I always have been. Yeah. I think that's safe to say. I'm a talker, and so I can debate, but I'm cool under pressure. I'm a cool under pressure kind of guy, and so I'm not going to try to baffle people with the BS. I'm really going to give you an honest fact or opinion and state so clearly. It's the basis for everything that I have here, and it's what I love about the Echo Chamber and Rodger Sanchez's podcast that he's invited me to be the guest on. And so it's really cool to be able finally to get Rodger to come on the show here. I've been super distracted at the beginning of this year, new contract and the comic book store and all these things going on, but this is still at the heart of me. This is still something that I'm doing in the background, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of, I was thinking about it today because what happened was I reached out to the Mises Institute and asked them to send me some copies of Economics in One Lesson, and I'm sending out copies every week. I've given away at least the equivalent of a copy every week because that's what they did. I reached out to them and I said, they asked you want a couple of copies or something like that. I just said, I was honest. I said, look, I do a show. I do a weekly show. I could give away one every week. I could give away a book every week. And I left it. So if you want to, send me 52 books. And I didn't think anything of it. And months went by because it's a long process. They go in between their different printings and make the deals and set them up and ship them out in bulk. And it's a big deal. They get all these donations. People support them. They ask you if you want to pay for the shipping and things like that, and I'm looking at the shipping and it's ridiculous amounts of shipping, and it's wow, it's like, how do they do this? And I'm just okay, whatever, And so I'm sitting here a couple of months later, and they show up. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes of books, 5 boxes of copies of Economics in One Lesson, and actually 4 boxes showed up. This was the thing that got me. 40 books showed up, and I thought, okay, well that's kind of odd. They sent me 40. I guess maybe 40 is the limit or something like that, and they couldn't send me any more, whatever it was. And then I come home the other day, and there's another box sitting there waiting for me, and it's the other 12 books. So it's 52. So they literally sent me one to give away every week. It's awesome. I got to give a couple of to Rodger Sanchez, who is my guest today. If I hadn't ever actually got to the point of spitting that out and saying that, I had promised to give him some to give to his audience. It's just really cool. I don't even remember exactly what what brought me to bring that point on or where I was going with it. But towardanarchy.com, and look for April 4th. It's Easter Sunday, and if you're not listening with me live, you're catching it later. Click on the archive button. There's apparently 2 places that you can get to it now. You can click on archive or articles. I remember doing that. It's kind of funny, and I now remember that I didn't fix it on purpose because I don't have all the articles up there, including that article that I wrote that I will get up there. I'll get them up there this week, and I'll share it with you next week about the technocratic medical dystopian nightmare thing that we all faced and that we face right now, and these apt comparisons of the vaccine passport to the yellow stars and other forms of the notion of show me your papers, the idea that you can't travel and move about or go places, do things without permission from the state, and the state is getting its ideas from a compromised medical tyranny, a dictatorship of ridiculous proportions that dates back a long time. They've been at it a long time. It's been a huge manipulation of that for, well, I mean, you talk about Rockefeller, there's some other fingers that you can point at, but the whole system is very much geared toward producing money and creating customers as opposed to actually curing disease. That was the point. April 4th is what you're looking for. If you have to click on the archive, that article will be up there next week. The article section will be fixed. It's funny. It's kind of funny that I forgot that I did that. We'll come back and I'll tell you who's on the show, who's coming up on the show, and we're just about 10 minutes from Rodger Sanchez right here on Toward Anarchy. Right after we get through this next break, Rodger Sanchez will join us. If you go to towardanarchy.com, look for April 4th. If it's not right there on the front page, you'll see Rodger as the guest this week. Next week, I think Bradley Thomas will be on the show. I haven't confirmed with him yet, but we were just talking just before the show. He's just back from vacation. And so we'll have another conversation with Bradley. Speaking with Dr. Joy, she reached out to me, and you guys probably know more about her than I do. I did not. I was not familiar with her. I may have heard of her name before, but I wasn't really particularly aware of who she was or what she was doing. But she reached out to me about being on the show and just sort of gave me some links to her work and things, and it's interesting. It's some fun stuff. One of the implications and just the things that I was glancing across and looking at was cloning, using the Shroud of Turin to somebody trying to extract the DNA. I don't know if I had heard of that before, but that was the impression that I got from one of the things that she had mentioned in the contact that she sent me. And so we'll have her on the show coming up here real soon. And then on the 18th, just a couple weeks from today, we'll have the creators of Flote, Flote. It's an application. It's a social media thing. We'll have them on. They're anarchists, the people who created it, and it's one of the top contenders for being a real potential place to get away from the controls of that controlled social media experience. They're really the Twitters and the Facebooks and those. That's a big goal. It's a long-term thing, but man, if we can all. I don't see it. It's like government. How do you hold them accountable? You can't ever hold them accountable because they don't make themselves. They don't expose themselves to any accountability, and really they don't have any. That's part of the problem with it. They can do what they want with their platform. It's a shame that they do it, and it's a shame that they don't listen to the input from people other than their own echo chamber of ideas, and because there's plenty of other places. I started watching the Q documentary on HBOMax here just last night. I'd seen it over the last week or so. It just popped up, and I hadn't wanted to watch it because you know what I think of Q. I've told you that he's just John Edwards. He's just cold reading the news. Whoever he is, whatever he is, he's just cold reading the news. He may have some inside track if he's lucky. Maybe the original one did, but there's some question about the latter posts by Q after some alterations to the networks that he's been on and the access that the people had, particular admins and people managing boards on 8chan and 4chan. These are places, I've mentioned these places before, I've talked about them. So I know you guys are familiar with them in certain senses, because I know that there's a Q line running through there, and there's still some people grasping to the notion that these things will happen, these predictions will happen. But it's interesting watching that whole it's like 6 episodes, so I'm nowhere near to anywhere even close to complete with it. But it's interesting watching the psychology of the people, both back and forth on both sides. Didn't believe in Q, came to believe in Q. They, believed in Q, now don't believe in Q. There's all these interesting range, but they're still all within this false paradigm of the political left and right. They never think outside of that box. They would never understand the concept of full spectrum dominance, even though I bet Q has used that in the hundreds of posts that he's made, she, whatever, that they've made I bet they've used that term before in their posts, and that they still would not get that they would still think within that political false paradigm. And I'll tell you why I know this for a fact, because people like Alex Jones. There you go. Hey, we'll come back and we'll talk to Rodger Sanchez. He's host of the libertarian debate podcast Echo Chamber, and he's my guest next on Toward Anarchy. Excuse me, let me get my drink. Boy, that was terrible. At least I have the thing prepared this time, and I won't have to sit through the next 27 minutes or so, whatever that stretch is in there, without having something to drink while trying to talk to my guest and clear the phlegm out of my throat. It occurred to me, I did remember what it was, the point that I was starting to make about before I talked about the books, because it just blew my mind that they would do that, and they would send me so many copies. The Mises Institute, just amazing people there. As I'm talking about preaching and preachers, and I'm pulling out my Bible, my economics in one lesson, and giving it out to people. And no, it was about the fact that they go through all that process, you spend all that money and give it all away, and to get it to me, and for me to even put them in somebody else's hand, it's going to cost almost $4 a piece to ship them. So it'll cost me almost $200 to ship all of those just to get them out to people. And that's just every little bit of cost. And that was in relation to supporting the network, and thank you, and we love you, and all that good stuff. TowardAnarchy.com, over there's a T-shirt that says "Consume," and it's blinking. Click on it and buy a T-shirt. Help me pay for the little few things like that. I notice I didn't change the link over real quick, but depending on when you're listening, it doesn't make any difference to you at all. That's how you listen. If you go to TowardAnarchy.com, you look for April 4th, and you see that my guest is Rodger Sanchez. He's host of the libertarian debate podcast Echo Chamber. We're going to have us a nice little conversation. We'll talk about we have to get to the heart of why shows like his, why this is what I started to say earlier, why this show, why this network, why Free Speech Network, why all these alternative voices for news and media are truly important. And right above that, where you would see that written on the April 4th page, there's the link. And depending on when in time you're listening to this, that link changes. It can say listen live this Sunday if it's not yet that time, which actually it's live right now, and it does still say that. But if you click on that link, one way or another, it pulls up an MP3 to listen to the show, or it takes you to TalkStream Live, and we encourage you to listen to the show over TalkStream Live. If you're browsing from your computer, you just have to click on the play button. You have to scroll down just a hair, because our banner is really, really big. The RBN banner is really, really big, and there's a spot right in there where there's they have to put their ads and stuff like that, and they have to be able to support their thing too, the folks at TalkStream Live. But that gives us a metric. I don't know where it is. I guess it's on here somewhere. It shows a metric of how the shows are doing in live time. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what page it's on. I've seen it before. Somebody shared the link with me before, but it's pretty cool to be able to see that we're up there with all these other guys that are broadcasting live at this time. All major names, everybody, you'd know every single one of them, and how we're just right up there hanging out with all of them with no problem, show after show after show. And it's just really cool to to be able to see and watch. It's one of the ways that we can do it is right there. So like, share, follow, subscribe. That's right there. If you're on the April 4th page, it should be real easy to just share that page across any of the basic social media stuff that you have out there, and just take that couple of extra seconds to make this happen, because I tell you, I watch those numbers, and if you're not participating in it, I can do this and put it out there, and it reaches people, but man, it reaches so many more people with just a few likes and shares of the link over and over again. And my guest knows that, because he's doing the same thing. He's carving out a niche on the internet and out there in this alternative media, and he's doing a fantastic job of it. I love his show, the Echo Chamber. It's a libertarian debate podcast, and there's some real questions and real attention being given to some of these ideas, but then there's some fun stuff too, and it's been real great to be a guest on the show, and so it's awesome to be able to reciprocate and have Rodger visit me here. Rodger, how you doing, man? It's good to get to talk to you outside in this sort of less formal setting, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I am pumped. I'm really excited to be here. Like, thanks so much for the kind words about Echo Chamber. I've been following your show for about 2 years now, since about 2019. So yeah, I've always loved having you on. You've always been one of the guys. I was like, I know if someone has something to say, it's going to be Michael Storm. He's never short for things to say. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Well, you've been real kind in just having me on, and I like being. I was talking about it earlier in the show. I like being on the outside. I don't like being the mainstream. I've never been. It's never worked for me.
Right.
When I've tried to play by the rules and do the things that other people do, I'm not as good at it.
Right, exactly.
So, man, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? Where, what's your background? Where were you born? How do you get into this libertarian thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so like my background. I mean, I'm from New England, basically. I mean, I moved around quite a bit, but I'm generally from New England, and we bounced around quite a bit. And I remember, I mean, when I was maybe like 13 or 14, I read this book. I don't know if you might remember these. They were called like the Idiot's Guides, like Idiot's Guide to this, Idiot's Guide to that. I was like 13 years old, and I read the Idiot's Guide to Philosophy. And it was just like a primer on everything. A whole bunch of shit I didn't really understand. I didn't understand everything, but I just got exposed to it. I found it really interesting. So I had always been into ideas and questions about things that really matter. And that that's a good thing, but it can also, I'm not going to say a bad thing. I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but it can be challenging when you're putting so many like competing influences in your head at the same time, because it can be very hard to synthesize all that information. So I've always been just attracted to alternative ideas. Kind of was a person who didn't really fit in anyways, kind of alluding to what you just said. So I wanted to find out who I was and what was it that I believed. And also, I'm a millennial, and we kind of grew up with the internet. And the late 90s, early 2000s internet really was the Wild West. It was a new frontier. It was like a genie, and you could just type in anything that you wanted, like anything you wanted to know, and then boom, it would just present itself to you. So it was this time where there was no censorship. You were no longer restricted to what you were learning in school or what you were learning in church or your mosque or your synagogue or whatever the case may be. You now had access to find out what you wanted to know and answer the questions that were important to you as a person. So I dove into that. I really got excited. To answer your point more specifically in terms of how I got turned on to the Liberty movement, it was about 2011. About 2011. I knew about Ron Paul, but I wasn't really, I thought he was a great guy and everything, but I didn't really buy in the message. I knew I wasn't a Republican. I thought I was a Democrat. I thought I was a Democrat because, the Democrats, well, they want to legalize drugs, right? And, well, the Democrats, they're against the war, and I bought all that stupid bullshit. So I got, I thought I was a Democrat, and I just saw once Obama came in office, he didn't do anything that he was supposed to be doing. Just like with Biden right now. I mean, a lot of Democrats say some libertarian things, but, they want maybe some libertarian beliefs. They want to end the war on drugs. They want peace. They want to do police reform, blah, blah, blah. And Biden's doing a complete 180 of that. You're not getting anything you're asking for. So it set me on a quest to be like, okay, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. This isn't what I signed up for. What else is out there? And, again, kind of doing that internet search, I came into the Libertarian Party. And slowly over time, I became really attracted to the non-aggression principle. It just makes sense. And what libertarians, what we have is we have a system that makes sense. Like, it's not contradictory. You know what I mean? It's this one principle that everyone just sort of intuitively agrees to, and then you can just build a philosophy out of that. Not committing an act of aggression against another person. And I just got really excited into it. And then, over the years, I voted for Gary Johnson twice, and then I got involved in my state affiliate. And it really just, it was home for me. And we've all heard that line a million times. I was always a libertarian, but just didn't know it. I was definitely that type of person. And I want to end with this. I mean, that's why censorship and echo chambers are so important for the establishment, because if the word gets out that this thing exists and is real and is potent, that creates a lot of problems. So there has to be censorship, there has to be echo chambers, there has to be false, unorganic division in order to keep people away from that. So that's kind of all over the place. That's a little bit of my background and basically how I got into the liberty movement.
No, that's fair. I think that's a fair response, given that it's such an open-ended question. But that's just the idea, is just to give you that opportunity to even think about it, because I don't know how many times I'm asked that question, or if I can answer it without thinking about it. How do I directly get to? Is there a line that I can draw from then to here? And sometimes you have to think about that and put it in its place, because sometimes you have to reconcile some of the things you did and some of the things that you said and ideas that you put forth out into the world and that you thought were valuable, and kind of cringe. Oh God, how did I ever think that was a thing?
Well, that's true. And, when I talked about it, I got into it around 2013, but and I don't know if this is the case for most people. In my intuition, this is the case for most people. I mean, you don't just sign up and immediately have this completely consistent libertarian paradigm. I remember saying, yeah, I think that drugs should be legal. I think the drug war is nonsense. But heroin's different, because heroin's a really bad drug. Well, that's not consistent. And it's because of sort of emotional connections that I held on to. And it took time. It took time for me to get exposed to the community. And then, wait, I'm being inconsistent here. And a lot of that is libertarian media. You know what I mean? It's giving you an alternative to things that you thought were common sense. I thought it was common sense that you would be against heroin and, kind of stick your chest out and say, oh, we got to kill these heroin dealers, blah, blah, blah. People feel like they're being a good guy when they're saying those things, like they love their community, but they're not taking into consideration just the terror of the drug war and how it causes a problem, and how people who use these substances need help, not punishment. They're already victims. You know what I mean? There are other ways to give people help. And, of course, it just violates the principle of that you own your own body. But what all I'm trying to say is, I think you're right. It takes time for people to truly embrace it. And, so if you see a lot of new people coming in the movement and they're saying some things that are a little off the wall or that don't really make sense, understand where they're coming from. They're still in the oven. You know what I mean? They're still just getting into it. It's going to take time. I'm not saying don't correct people, but, I was there once, and to your point, I mean, I've said all sorts of things that I would take back now. You have to give that grace to newer people who are coming into the movement.
Well, you mentioned Dr. Paul, and I recently came across this quote of his, or at least it's been attributed to him, and I don't know what the quote actually is, but it's about the fact that it's a perfect message, and we're just imperfect messengers, and that there has to be and that to me says that there has to be the actual practice, not the learning. The learning, it's there. It's really actually easy to understand the basics of libertarianism, of voluntarism, of anarchy. They really are very simple, basic understandings of sort of live and let live. It really comes down to that. It's all the minutia and everything else that we've been programmed to understand that are supposedly different, and they're not, because it's something that I brought up earlier in the show, and I'm always trying to bring all of these points together, and it's that there's this manipulation of everything into true, false, left, right, black, white, all of
Right.
these different weird divisions that I can't see anymore. And I never saw them because I never saw them as a kid. There was only this period of time as a young adult where people tried to, and I tried to get along with society and failed, as I was saying before. Tried to play the game in that sense, just do the 9 to 5. But there's always this core manipulation into these separate ideas, and I never saw them as a child, so why would I see them as an adult? So I always bucked the system. I always had a problem with, well, what are you talking about? Why? And the last one to go is always the authoritarianism, that final is it okay to smoke pot, and is it okay for the other guy to do heroin because I'm smoking my pot? That's always the last one.
Yeah, it is. That, or another one. And I'm coming around to this because I had a debate with a guy I want to give a shout out. You mentioned the Mises Caucus. He's the Mises organizer of Maine, and we debated should there be a publicly funded military? Can we have is there a voluntary option? And I think that's another big one for people too to give up. Okay, yeah, well, everything needs to be voluntary, but the military is different because for what insert your reason. And I do take more of a minarchist position, but unfortunately, I must confess, I'm very insecure about that, and it's starting to slip away because I'm learning about Blackwater. I'm learning about, the government's already using private contractors. You know what I mean?
A lot of the military really is already private contracts. A lot of the military is. There's manpower is one thing, those actual physical fodder bodies, but the work, the bulk of things, a lot of that stuff is private contractors now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my position on minarchism, basically a total agora, free market, but we have the watchmen of the market, so to speak, the police. Even that's kind of coming from a sense of ignorance on the military. Because when I talk to guys who come out of the military, they're like, it's not efficient. The equipment sucks. Things break all the time. We make some moves, and we're typically just cleaning up after the contractor.
Oh God, my one of my best friends. He's been my best friend since we were probably 10, I guess. We must have been 10. We'd be about 5th grade. He's a lifelong Army guy, and he was telling me just the other day about the fact that they would go at the same time to do their runs and their duties and stuff, and that they were going to get hit. And he finally complained to somebody and said, "No, we're not doing this." And the next week after he pulled his guys out, the guys that replaced him got hit.
Wow. Yeah. So I mean, like you're saying, and that's the propaganda. You know what I mean? That's the propaganda of the military is great. Thank you for your service. USA is number one. The military is so wonderful. And it's just not true.
We got to go into a break. Hold that thought. We're talking to Rodger Sanchez. Go to towardanarchy.com to follow along. We'll be right back. Well, as you can imagine, I'm a fan of Rodger Sanchez because he is a voice, a champion for reasoned debate and some logical conversations and really trying to argue. I've laid out this before any number of times and feel I can do so many, many more times, that arguing is something that you do with skill and with reason, and you do it in order to reach understanding and to solve differences and problems. And it's not this exchange stuff that you see going on Facebook. So I really appreciate the echo chamber and the work that Rodger does and what he's working toward. And if you want to support him, help him out, if you go to towardanarchy.com, I have the April 4th page. As always, it'll be there, whether you have to go through the archive or whether you can get to it from the front page right now. You can follow the echo chamber on Facebook. It's facebook.com/echo chamber program. And then I've shared that link there with you. And then I also shared a link to the YouTube page, which is something you'll have to help Rodger with. This is one of these things. Get him a couple more likes, a few more likes closer to the being able to pick your name. I was so excited when I was able to take youtube.com/C/Toward Anarchy. I was oh yeah, and all you have to do is get to that first 100 people. So help Rodger get to that magic number so that he can claim a name and be able to say it. Because if I tried to read you the address, you would choke on it. We're going to have to get into, this is a really short segment right here, but we'll go right to the top of the hour and come back, and we'll have to talk about really what we're going through right now. Because it's what I try to express in the show about being trapped in this bubble and not being able to come outside of it. And the reason that most people are trapped in this bubble is because of the information that they receive and their inability to critically think about information. And so it's more important than ever to have really true open sources of information.
Yeah, it is. I mean, anytime that you have technology, you know, there's an advantage, there's a disadvantage. It's not just a plus. And I think with something, I'll use Facebook as an example. I mean, it's an interesting system for not only the producer but the consumer. So we have this database of people liking things. I like this, I like that. And then you can sell that data to someone to provide the person with what they like. Well, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for people to get what they like. But when you do that with ideas and philosophy and politics, and you're just feeding people what they think, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, and it's actually really, really easy to do on Facebook because Facebook is not that smart. The social media is not. Right. The AI is really, really dumb, and it's going to feed you. It's bad. I mean, people don't think about it. I tell people to invest a little bit of time, and I get such crap about it. It's really obnoxious. I really find it funny. And it's telling of the type of people that would do it. But when I talk about maintaining your social media, and one of those things is the stuff that they feed you through your feed. It's not just about your likes. It's about the things that you block and about the things that you remove from your feed just as much as it is about anything else. And if you go in and curate the keywords that it looks for, it's such mundane crap. It could pull up anything. The word city. You just CITY, that's it, and that's one of my favorites. What the hell is that? Hey, we got to go into the top of the hour. We'll come right back here with Rodger Sanchez on Toward Anarchy. All right, we're off into hour number 2. Go to towardanarchy.com to follow along. Look for April 4th. You'll see I'm talking to Rodger Sanchez. He's host of the Libertarian Debate podcast, Echo Chamber, and it's fantastic, not just because I've been on it, but because of what he's attempting to do with the show and the idea behind it. I really appreciate it. Discourse, reasoned discourse. It seems to be something sort of certainly in the social media age, a thing that I guess it's not gone, but it's always been this way, right? I mean, before the internet came along, if you wanted to talk to somebody about Hayek or Mises or other libertarian things, I mean, you had to go meet in some dank, smoke-filled room in the back of a restaurant, some Chinese restaurant on the other side of town, with some questionable fellows, some of them that didn't bathe well. I mean, it's always been. You mentioned earlier in the show this. The idea of this, I've talked about it before. It's an internet renaissance, and I don't know if people who are late comers to the internet, certainly I'm not just talking about people born later, but just any individual along the way who's picking it up now as opposed to 20 years ago or more, 25, 27, some of us, more if you go back and count BBS. It was the Wild West. It was an open forum. Anybody could get out there, and it's funny because when it first started, it was closed. Most people accessed it through AOL, but then all of a sudden they realized there was this thing called the Internet Explorer, that that mysterious E that was down there, and they click on that thing and they could type in any address and it'd take them somewhere. these weird places and find weird things. Yeah, it has changed, and it's weirdly fluctuating back and forth all the time, and it's all about information control. And I've watched it and I've documented it over the years about how Orwellian it is, and the fact that they change things and they make things disappear. So it's harder than ever to trust this so-called mainstream media. And when we were talking about having you as a guest on the show, you mentioned earlier on something about Project Mockingbird, and
right.
I thought that was great, just because we have that in common, that media approach and that understanding. I'm always trying to analyze, media presentation and offer for people an understanding of the difference between what makes a good media presentation versus what is cliche versus what is Project Mockingbird.
Exactly, and we were joking about it on social media, the alleged Project Mockingbird, as we says. You know what I mean? Yeah, okay, buddy. Yeah, it's not just, and I'm sure I don't have to educate your audience on Project Mockingbird, but just in case, it's a CIA operation that basically uses news and entertainment to control public opinion, and it happened. And it's not just, your news. It's not just your political commentary, although it is that. It's your sports. It's standing up. There's basically a military parade. Fighter jets go across the stadium. It's your comic books. It's your video games. It's everything. And you're constantly having these assumptions, these ideas that aren't your own ideas, these beliefs that didn't originate with you. They didn't originate with your own mind. There's someone else's, and they're being, subtly forced, sometimes not so subtly, just inserted into you. And you go around walking and believing certain things that you don't really believe. You know what I mean? And that's terrifying. So, why I love Toward Anarchy, why I love, my show, all the shows out there, is it serves as an alternative. You're going to watch news commentary. So you might as well watch something that, is giving you an alternative to, establishment media and that type of thing. And, around, I would say, in my opinion, I mean, you've obviously researched this very well. In my opinion, from the era of 2015 to 2017, there was this zenith of the internet, because the internet was a very decentralizing thing. I mean, now anybody could get online and express their opinion. And online, especially in the forums you were referencing, especially in those forums of the old days, your success was based by and large on your argument, not, where you came from or your media credentials. But it was, an isolated community. But from 2015 to 2017, we can call them the normies, if you will, as normal people, were online and were getting exposed to different ideas, and it shook the world.
Well, there's something I want to comment. I hate to interrupt you, but I don't want to miss this, because the time period that you're talking about is actually really important, because this is a time period where Q appeared. And I just started watching that documentary on HBOMax about Q, and there's a tie-in here. There's a tie-in to where we are today on the internet, and the information in Q-Anon and these 4chan, 8chan, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and maybe this wasn't where you're going with this, but my whole take on the Q thing, I don't know if it's intentional, but it's definitely the effect. The establishment says, hey, there's this fake news called Q. There's all these lies about the vaccines or lies. It's bad information. And if we have a totally free and open internet, if we have totally free and open forums, that hurts people. So we're not going to censor speech. We're just going to censor hate speech, or we're going to censor, false speech, which is the same thing. And the last point I want to make before I kind of stop there was, I was on, I think it was Chat Roulette, and I was talking to someone from China who got through the firewall, and she was she was interested in talking, but I could see the programming in her mind. And I was asking about, why is there a firewall? Why does your government have a firewall to prevent you from accessing information? Not that we're that that better. But, just trying to get her to walk through, questioning her own government. And that's exactly what she said. I'll never forget it. She said, well, if there's a free and open internet, people will say things that are wrong. And that's bad. You don't want people to say things that are wrong. But who is the government to tell us what is right or what's wrong? They've been, what's their track record? You know what I mean? Like, they don't have an interest to determine what is right or what's wrong. That's your gift. That's a part of your ability, the blessing of being a human is to find out these things for yourself, not to subsidize that to someone else who doesn't have your interest in mind. So I don't know.
No, that's very well put. It's excellent. I guess all we can keep doing is just saying this over and over again, because this so many times ends up being the conversation that people like ourselves end up having, because we're already well past this idea that there's any value to be gained in listening with or working through the establishment. We're well past that idea. So
right.
It's more about the minutia of the things, like we were saying earlier in the show about the sort of difference between the pot smoker and the heroin addict, or these weird differences where when it comes down to it, if you actually have the founding, a foundation in the principles of these ideas, that you can't question that too. You can't have that split value system throughout, and I find it a weird place to be the libertarian, that middle of the road guy still trying to play the game, because I only did it myself for a little bit, just sort of having fun, I guess. I helped represent the Paul campaign in 2012, and
oh wow.
Yeah, and it was fun. I did some silly things, like I stood out in front of the Republican convention in Denver there, where they were selecting their representative. I stood out in a orange jumpsuit that said FEMA on the back of it, and shackles and a black hood, and put on a little bit of theater and had some fun with the whole thing. But it's still, I still always try to. Even then, that's not that long ago, but even then, an anarchist would come up to me, a street anarchist, a leftist, and want to assert anarchy, and you have to say no. You can't. You lean on libertarianism because there's a difference in this understanding, and it's one more word, it's one more idea in a long list of things that we've just been trained to believe something else about, and to just immediately have an immediate physical and mental response to even the suggestion of something like libertarian. It was all over Twitter this week. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and good job for them, kind of getting that out there. It is true. A lot of those things, when we talked about the necessity for a publicly funded military, death penalty for heroin, a lot of that stuff is just stuff that the individual didn't come to that conclusion on their own. It's an assumption. It's a cultural assumption, and I think you said it well. It's a knee-jerk reaction, and it takes people being able to hear another side, to wipe away maybe some of those beliefs that aren't organic. And that's one of the things that I like about the show. I'm not trying to stick my chest out, but I try intentionally to have a radical and opposing viewpoints. And, by the end of the show, the two people who maybe on social media would have blocked each other, they would have been using insults. I've never had an episode, this is kind of like a behind-the-scenes thing, I've never had an episode on the debate show, whether it was a commie, a Nazi, an anarchist, whoever, where at the end of hearing each other out in this controlled way, that they weren't closer. There's almost more of a respect between those two people. And I've even monitored, okay, this person and that person who have completely opposing viewpoints, and they would never mingle and communicate. They almost develop, I don't know if it's like a friendship, but they start following each other, or they start commenting on each other, and they have this conversation. So you talked about division, and I don't think we are. I think the division's intentional. You know, I think it's easier to control us when we're divided, and it's helpful. We can do this. You can just have a rational conversation with someone that you completely disagree with, and that's more healthy. That's making a better world than this world where you only get spoon-fed your own opinions, and you know, anyone who disagrees with you, well, it's because they're, you know, evil or something to that effect. And that I think that attitude is accelerating. So I do like providing a space where these very intelligent people and the audience vicariously through them can hear the other side and find that, hey, it's okay. Like you made it. A different opinion didn't harm you.
Yeah, and that's absolutely what I love about it too. And by all means, stick your chest out. You should. I think that you've hit on a spot in this space, this whatever it is, this liberty, fight for liberty, whatever it is. You found a spot, and it's a spot that needs attention. It needs somebody like yourself who's willing to do what you do. I mean, you're going the extra mile to bring these people together. I don't know if you would talk about the details or anything like that, but I mean, you know, you have to finance it, and you pay these people for their time, and there's purpose behind it, and I think your approach is great, and I just love any idea right now that is bringing people together in a conversational space. It's the past, it's the present, it's the future of communication, because people are listening and they're looking for it, and they're looking for it everywhere. So you might as well be everywhere and just turn it on and go.
Yeah, and, you know, I think there was a time, you know, where people were really interested in the whole, you know, Ben Shapiro style of where it was, you know, Ben Shapiro slams this other guy, you know, this sort of, you know, macho debate thing. But maybe people are tired of it. Yeah. And, you know, instead of watching two people attack and, you know, who's going to win, it's just like you said, it's just a conversation. So when Echo Chamber started, I had it in my mind that there would be like a winner, and there'd be a loser. It would be sort of like a sport, if you will. But as it went on, it just doesn't have that energy. It's instead of about one side winning, it's about people just coming together. And in one thing I like to say is that the winner of the debate is the viewer. You know, for getting access to unrestricted ideas. Like that's the prize. The prize is that you got to hear things through the filter in an unrestricted way. So absolutely.
Yeah, the whole idea of just getting some people together to talk about these things, because everybody's listening. Everybody's looking for something to listen to right now, whether they know it or not. And all they have to do is hear it. And it really truly is about planting these seeds. And I learned this years ago back doing street action, working with We Are Change. And my experience so many times was we would pass out hundreds and hundreds of DVDs, whatever it was, whether it's 9/11 stuff or you know, something about Vietnam, or just whatever it is about the government, about police corruption, you name it. We were handing these things out, and we would constantly get these stories. Somebody would show up to a meeting and they'd say, "Yeah, you guys were here at such and such a place at City Park on such and such a day for, you know, festival or whatever, and you were handing out these CDs, these DVDs, and I just took it and I threw it in my car and went home and came across it 6 weeks later or a month later or whatever, and I threw it in and I thought, wow, and here I am."
Yeah, you never know. Like you never know who you're going to turn on to. Just like the internet back in I don't know, 2011 was crucial for me, you know, getting it. But you never know who's going to find access to your thing. You know, sometimes people there's that joke of, oh, well, it seems like every libertarian has a podcast. That's kind of a good thing, though. Like, we want people expressing themselves. We want ideas out there, you know, because you never know what kind of community you're going to build, or who you're going to reach out to. And Operation Mockingbird is real. It is not alleged. It's a real thing. So in order to fight that, we have to replace it. And I maybe I want to do this. I've never really talked about this before, but I am interested in finding, you know, libertarians, but libertarians who do things that aren't necessarily political. Like on FSN, on the network, there's a few, like, just gaming streams. I'm not really into gaming myself like that, but some people are. You know, can we find, you know, alternative libertarian, you know, sports shows, people who talk about sports or whatever it is that you're into? You don't have to access the mainstream to get that type of content.
See, that's interesting that you say that. That's awesome, because I know that there are people out there that are into this stuff. Yeah, I'm connected with, you know, sort of libertarian PC gamer group and things like that. There are people that are looking for that. Yes, absolutely. I myself have a gamer page set up on Facebook, but I've never broken the barrier and sat there and played games and talked about anarchist stuff. I just haven't done it.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, you know, stuff like that. So we need to do the political stuff. You know, we need to do that because that needs to be done. But what you're talking about there, where you just put on a headset and you're playing, but you're, you know, dropping some red pills on, you know, freedom and self-ownership, that can pull people in. And I'll tell you what, the communists are doing that. They're all over, you know, the game.
Yeah, they are. Hey, we got to go into a break. Stick around here. We're going to come back and we'll wrap it up with Rodger Sanchez. The fact is, truth is, we could probably go on like this for hours, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rodger is at work. You're on lunch. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. There's a show called Adam versus the Man. I work for the man. That's right, man. So I'm on my lunch break. Yeah, buddy.
That's great. Hey, boss man, I'm taking a break, and I'm going to go talk about the man. That's great. No, that's the kind of commitment I'm talking about. That's what you get here. I'm definitely a fan of the show. I appreciate you for what you're doing, and it's really great to see you succeeding at it. And I hope to help you continue to do that any way that I can, man. I really like what you do, and as far as, you know, some of these other things we're talking about, let's keep talking. I love this the video game thing. There's a place for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This was a blast. I've loved the show for a couple of years, so this is kind of cool to actually be on it. So yeah, I appreciate all the kind words, man. This was fun.
Yeah, anytime, you bet. Anytime you got something going on, you want to talk about it or let you know. I'm always happy to share what's going on. And of course, if you guys want to, and you should, tune into Echo Chamber and check it out and follow along. There's a Facebook link up there. That one's the easy one. It's facebook.com/Echo Chamber Program. That's really easy to just follow along there. You can follow Rodger and what he's got going on, and the guests, and all the links to all the shows are always posted up there, so you can always catch them. Because if you don't catch it live, you have to wait a little bit. It requires some time before it gets posted to the. Because I'll do the show on a Friday night, and then I'll talk about it on Sunday, and everybody's, well, where's the I'm waiting just like everybody else. As soon as I have it, you'll have it too. But you can follow along there, and then of course I shared the link to the YouTube channel as well, so that it's it's a pleasure to do that. You know what we have to do? We have to make sure that you give me your address later, and I'll send you some copies of Economics in One Lesson that you can give out to some of your callers or something. Because I had mentioned that before.
I'll do that.
Yeah. Well, they sent me so many of them. I talked about it earlier in the show. I had no idea that they would really do it. I just reached out because they always send these emails a couple times a year, I guess. hey, get your copies of Economics in One Lesson. And I'm like, all right, well, here. And I just told them the truth. I said, I do a weekly show. You could send me 52 copies. I'll give away a book's worth a week for sure. No problem. Easily done. And they did it. They just showed up.
Yeah, the Mises Caucus, I mean, I'm not a member of the Mises Caucus, but they're doing great stuff. I mean, they're really proactive in not compromising on the message, but also reaching people. So stuff like they're doing like that, where giving you Economics in One Lesson, and platforming a lot of these comics and comedians, and just finding different ways to get the ideas of self-ownership out there is impressive. So I'm glad to hear you're working with them.
Yeah, I've always been a fan, just everything they do, because it's just a source of information. It's one of those places they're like Lou Rockwell and a few others. They've been on the internet for a long, long time. And they've been around talking about these things for a long, long time. And even before that, reading, subscribing to some of the tracks like Imprimis and some of these other just wonderful. Man, there's so many resources out there for people who are looking for libertarian, voluntarist, agorist, anarchist values. Man, they're all over. In fact, I'll be telling you about one here coming up after we say goodbye to Rodger here, because it's a big deal. I mean, if you're looking for a voice, there's a voice saying what you're wanting to hear out there, and don't take that the wrong way. We're not trying to create an echo chamber here,
Right.
I tell you.
No,
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, there's we've kind of been a little black-pilled about the internet, but to say something, to kind of piggyback off that, there's a lot of opportunities too. So it's also a optimism as well.
No, thank you for saying that, because I really try to temper that understanding and the failure of the internet. It's not a failure of the tool, and people, they should get this by now. It's a failure of the ability to use the tool. People didn't know how to communicate before Facebook and 240 characters and all these different things came along to interfere and to create noise in the communication cycle. People already failed to be able to communicate well. How was it going to be improved by introducing a bunch of tools that they didn't understand and haven't learned how to use properly? It's just a simple fact of the tools. Rodger, thank you so much for hanging out, brother. You take care, and we'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Anytime, buddy. Thank you.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
My puppy, she's doing much better. We definitely got past any crisis, I think, unless she happens to develop some bacterial or whatever, viral something infection. I don't know. Any kind of infection on the inside. It looks like the exterior, the wounds are healing even after they took that huge chunk out of her and made her look like Frankendog. But she's doing real fine now, and we'll get the stitches out tomorrow, I think, and then within the next couple of days we'll have to deal with the claims by the state of vaccinations and records and being off leash, and I have to go enter some plea against these things that they accuse you of anytime that there's one of these things going on. I watch it through my neighborhood. Of course, I never pay any attention to this stuff until something happens. But now I'm looking around my neighborhood, and this neighbor's got his dog out, and the guy down the street, the big redneck. Hey, come on, it's just a reality. Down the street, he's walking around his yard. His dog's off the leash and stuff. I'm like, what is going on? Why are people? Why is that happening? And why is it happening in front of my face? When I look at that, after all this happened, I went to confirm what I saw with my own eyes, because I never gave this any consideration before. And looking at it now, it seems like it's a serious design flaw. I mean, I guess I get a reasoning behind it, but then again, I don't. So the screen door, the door that was closed that she pushed her way through, what she was able to do was to push up a window to open the window in the door. It has these, these sliding latch. You put your fingers one on each side and you pull it in and you lift the thing up and it slips in the notches and it stays. Well, I'd given any consideration before that, especially since you have to pull it like that to actually get it to come out. I didn't give any consideration to what the shape of those things might be underneath, but they're sealed. You can't see them in this screen. It's fairly new, fairly modern, and so you can't see what's on the other end of those little levers that you're pulling on to raise and lower the window. Never gave them any consideration. Have done this for years. Lift it up just enough that she can get her face there, and that's it. And that way she can just sort of sniff around and she'll see a squirrel or something. But she's never, ever given any indication of wanting to try to or even being capable of pushing her way through that window until these dogs from across the street that she's familiar with are brought into our yard. All of a sudden, so I had to go and I had to look at this thing because I'm seeing this happen in real time in my mind as I'm coming up behind her and trying to stop her from doing this. I see it happen. I can't believe it's happening. And so I'm looking at it the other day and I go, well, I mean, I saw it happen with my own eyes. It must be easy. I reach down and I pick this thing up and I just pop, 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 pop. It just slides all the way up. Never gave it any consideration before. Never just went to it and grabbed it and pushed it up and tried to force it. I wouldn't think you would want to do that to it. So it sucks. The whole thing really sucks, and I'm gonna have to deal with it. And I have to fall back on that. Yeah, well, just because somebody has a legal right, don't they have to make good decisions? Don't they have to be properly prepared to deal with the not just the consequences of the things that they do, but in the case of let's face it, escorting a wild animal around. It's certainly wild to anyone else. It may not be wild to them. It's friendly to them, but it's wild to anyone else. A pit bull, whatever, dog, doesn't matter. I don't care if it's a tiny little chihuahua. Out into public in danger on the end of a rope, leash, whatever, and you don't know how to control it. It's not your dog. It's all these other excuses for why your dogs were in my yard, regardless of whether you had any right to be walking them at the time. The whole thing, it'll be an interesting little, side note, I guess, for some period of time to come on the show, probably forever, depending on how it plays out. I need to call Judge Judy. I do. I need to call Judge Judy. I need to have her litigate, to mediate. Right? That'd be awesome, be on Judge Judy. Have her. I have much respect for the woman, for all the TV presence and all that, and just the hype of that. She protects property and she protects people and she listens to arguments and she doesn't always get it right in my eyes, but she does a really good job of being that voluntary, market chosen third party decider of dispute. Wow, what a novel idea! There's always so much stuff I could talk about. One of the things that I wanted to mention was because during the conversation with Rodger, we kept making fun of Operation Mockingbird, but we weren't. And you kept hearing me laugh when he would say something. Let me clarify. I was not. He was not. Making fun of actual Operation Mockingbird. What it was is that I do this where I'm trying to get people to pay attention to the link, click on the link, visit the show, get the likes on the social media. And so I found that the best way to do that is through a meme, because for whatever reason, people's short attention span, whatever it is. So, and it could be anything. It doesn't matter. It's just a picture, image, meme that makes some claim, potentially politically, socially unacceptable or controversial, and it will get attention. And I did that because I've been talking to Rodger in the week leading up to the show about. I'm not talking to it directly. It's indirectly, we're hashing out what we were going to talk about because it's such an open forum, as it were. And this Operation Mockingbird came up, and he brought that up, and so I know what Operation Mockingbird is, and I know what Operation Paperclip is. I've told a lot of cops about that one, sitting in handcuffs on a bench. Operation Mongoose, the Phoenix program. I know about all these. And that's why I shared this meme, because I wanted something to share around that would get these likes. And Operation Mockingbird is one of these things where it's, depending on who you're talking to, it's a real thing or it's not. And I brought up Wikipedia, and I took a screenshot of the Wikipedia, and I created this little meme about it. And it says Operation Mockingbird is an alleged large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency that began in the early years of the Cold War and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. But it's that first sentence. Operation Mockingbird is an alleged large-scale program. Alleged. That's what we were laughing about. That's what I was laughing about, and that was the joke. And most people who saw it got the joke. They pointed out the alleged part. They got the same joke that I got. It's funny that's called alleged. I guess maybe the alleged part is whether or not it's still going on. No, it's going on, but it's so different now. It's much different than it was during the Cold War. Still the same general purpose, but the technology that exists and the openness of people and information and their communications, whether they like it or not. It's funny because my buddy Johnny, one of my friends I said about, a good friend from the We Are Change days, he keeps trying to convince me, and I need to get back to him. I meant to get back to him last night. He keeps trying to convince me to get on one of these apps, one of these other apps. I don't know, Telegram or what's the other one? Signal. One of these, they're private communication apps supposedly, and to me, I have a couple of problems with that. One, they want too much information when I've gone to sign up for it. So how is it private if they have too much information? Two, it's just not that secure. I know you guys think it's secure. I know you get that, and even if it's encrypted end to end, they still know what the message. They know a message was sent from point A to point B. They know where it was sent from, and they know who it was sent to. Knowing what's in it doesn't really matter, especially if all they have to do is, it's all fake. It's all a joke. It always has been, but now it's even easier to just. I mean, they can create any digital trail they want for somebody. They can completely fabricate a digital trail for somebody and make it look like somebody has done something that they haven't done. And it's not the same. Well, there's, you can do the scientific investigation, but the reality is that you have to get them to investigate themselves to truly expose that if it happens, if there is a manipulation of data like that. You have to get, and if not, if you're doing it from the outside and you're trying to prove that they've faked a trail, you have to have the resources to do it and the people to do it. And then you have to end up ultimately getting the data before they do, because they will delete the trail. They will eliminate the trail. And as I mentioned it when we were talking to Rodger, this idea, this Orwellian idea that exists on the internet and with information, and I've documented it so well over the years, just how quickly they've managed to manipulate and change and hide data, and it's frightening how quickly it can happen. And it's not any it's not any easier to do, because you can erase some things, you can delete some things, but then you still comes down to people finding ways to make it work. You know, they try to shut down Q, can't shut him down. He just moves to a different channel, a different board. And you know, that's the reality. It's the reality that exists here. It's RBN's reality. It's Free Speech Network's reality. It's that we are decentralized. We are beholden to no one in any central authority other than ourselves and those we voluntarily work with. And so you'll never shut us up. You never shut us up. The only thing that's going to shut us up is, you know, I mean, there are a couple of things. Death, that's pretty final. That'll shut us up. But the only other thing would be is if we just quit. And that's so easy to do. I've watched it over the years. I've watched a lot of freedom fighters, whatever, liberty truthers, people just quit. Just quit. A lot of them slip off into hermit living, hippie living, off the grid. They drop out. And I get it, because maybe they don't have the right voice. They haven't found that niche, or maybe they just don't. They don't care. You know, I will be the first to tell you, and I have over and over again, that we're not here living for other people. That it's great when we work together, and it works best when we do so voluntarily. All these things are absolutely true. But we shouldn't be living for each other, and that these individuals, they're not living for somebody else. They're living for. I had to explain this to my business partner the other day. I think I mentioned that one of my business partners had sort of run off with thousands of dollars. Not a business money, it turns out. We were afraid that might have been the case initially, but it's not. It was money that legitimately was his, but also wasn't, because he has responsibilities. And my other business partner, I guess he didn't quite understand that. He was a little bit confused about it. And Ben's cool. Ben's an interesting character, because he's lived a little bit of a sheltered existence himself, and it's interesting that he has a willing naivete about him, that he's open and willing and wanting to learn, but it also is exposed in a situation like that where he's looking on his own existence in terms of my other partner, Scott. And then we have one other partner. It's a four-way thing. He's looking at his life in terms of Scott and his responsibilities. This guy up and grabs a bunch of money that is not his. That, I mean, he can lay a claim to it, but he can't, because he's not entitled to just up and take what has been community property voluntarily for years and abscond with it and run off and find a new level. I'm talking about doing this to his wife and his family. And Ben is sort of confused about it in these terms. And I'm like, look, man, your situation is entirely different. You don't have children. You don't have a wife. You don't have anybody that you're responsible for you. You can live a different life. You can stop doing whatever you're doing today, and it doesn't necessarily affect anybody else. You can quit your job. You can up and run off to jump on a plane and fly to who knows where and meet with some woman and start a new relationship. And I haven't heard the whole story, because it's funner to not even know. It's not even I haven't had the chance. I was in there earlier this week for one day, and we were just too busy. There just was not a chance to sit down and talk about exactly what had happened, because he's come back. He's back. It's just I have to think. I have to stop and wow, what a way to make some choices in your life, of all the things that you can do, and to just make some poor decisions, and to really affect the people around you in such a selfish and immature way. It's amazing to me. I've never experienced it before. Let's see. Do I know? Are any of my friends? I guess my friends aren't divorced. I don't think any of my friends are divorced. I think any of the ones that actually have been married. So I've never really experienced anybody really not liking their significant other. We got to go into a break. We'll come back. We'll tell you what's coming up in the next few weeks right here on Toward Anarchy. All right, one last time, go to towardanarchy.com. Make sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, wherever you're getting the link, wherever you're hearing the show, whatever community you're in. Take the links, share them. Spread us around. Spread the word about what we're doing here across the network and on the show, and what we're trying to accomplish in supporting things, people like Rodger Sanchez and what he's doing with Echo Chamber. And it's funny, my wife earlier this week, she asked me if I would be doing the show today or not, and I so perfectly dad joked this without even hesitation. I said, no bunny is going to keep me from doing the show. Just boom, like that. You know, B-U-N-N-Y, Easter, no bunny. Yeah. Anyway, it was just one of those perfect moments where you're just saying, I couldn't have wrote it better. I couldn't have planned that one better. I've been waiting to say that one my entire life and didn't even know it. Another one of those, I told you so kind of things happened this week. Marvel Comics announced that they're going to go through their own new distribution channels, and this had happened here with this whole shakeup over the last year. The distribution channels. It's a big deal because in the 90s, a company called Diamond was basically handed a monopoly on the distribution of comic books, and it's been a sore spot for a lot of independent comic book dealers, for one, but it's also been a bit of a hassle, I think, for those guys, those major publishers themselves, when they should have been their own. They should have published themselves. They really should have. They shouldn't have been. If they were going to consolidate, they should consolidate internally by expanding into printing their own stuff, otherwise getting their books to the people on the ground. And Diamond it's been a sore spot for a long time, and they've lost their monopoly. They've been destroyed over the last year, and ultimately it's a good thing. I look at it from the economics standpoint. I don't know the stories behind it, but I know that there's a lot of animosity over the whole thing, and I understand it as having worked in and owned a comic book shop a couple of times now, and having to deal with the distribution process and ordering of books, and the limitations in the fact that you can only get them from this one place, and so it's great to see. I've been enjoying my comic books in the entire industry here lately, because it's just been sort of a heyday with it. Over the last year, I've watched $100 books turn into $500 books, and I'm sitting on some of this gold. So it's all paying off, comic book nerds and people who decry the comic book nerd. We'll catch up with you next week. I think Bradley Thomas will be here. Otherwise, Dr. Joy's coming up in a couple of weeks, and the creators of Float will be around too. So you take care until then.